Hi there. Lindsey Sparks here with the next episode of Read by the Author. Today, we continue Echo in Time, the first book in the Echo Trilogy, read by the author, which is me, Lindsey Sparks. And now, let's return to the story. Chapter 17, Show and Tell. Are you planning to do this every morning? I asked Marcus, who currently had his arm draped over my shoulders, as we walked to Denny Hall. It was drizzling, as usual, but I didn't care. Why? Marcus murmured, glancing down at me. I shrugged. I just like to know what to expect. I don't like to be disappointed. And if I wasn't waiting outside your apartment building to walk you to a classroom in which we would be spending the day together, would you be disappointed? His tone was too unconcerned, too disinterested. He really wanted to know the answer. Oh, I don't know. I stopped walking in the middle of the cement path and rose on tiptoes to plant an undeniably steamy kiss on his lips, unconcerned that other people were passing around us. Yes, Marcus, I said, resuming our meandering pace. I'd be very disappointed. Well then, yes. I plan to do this every morning, he replied. That is, every morning until we wake up together in bed. I didn't know you were planning on staying in Seattle for years, I teased. Years, he chortled, like it was the most ridiculous thing he'd ever heard. It was the most ridiculous thing I had ever said. But still, he was a cocky bastard. Have you spoken to Alexander in the past few days? I asked. If Marcus was surprised by the drastic change of subject, he didn't show it. No. Why? So he doesn't know that I know about you and the others? And he doesn't know we've been all over each other for the past few days? No, Marcus said. There was something, many things to be sure, he wasn't telling me. But then there was something I wasn't telling him. And the others on the team? They don't know that I know they're Nezarette, do they? No. Will you do me a favor? I asked tentatively. He narrowed his eyes and looked at me askance. That would depend on the favor. Oh no, Marcus wasn't on the verge of professing his undying love to declare he would do anything for the woman currently holding his attention. Just don't let anyone know that I know about you and the others until tomorrow. Please, I added the last word for good measure. That was phase 1 of my plan. I had just set a platter of oven-fried chicken on the table between a serving bowl of mashed potatoes and a gravy boat when Alexander knocked on the door. It was exactly 8 o'clock. Pleasantly, I greeted my grandpa, and we headed to the table. Anxiety and excitement flooded my veins as I hurtled into phase 2 of my plan. I'd really like to be able to trust you, Alexander, I began, scooping mashed potatoes onto my plate. My grandpa looked acceptably confused. You can trust me, he said, meeting my eyes. I thought I could believe him, and I desperately wanted to. Lately, my world had been one big tangle of lies and half-truths. Some people lied to protect me, like my parents and Grandma Sue's, while others withheld valuable information because it was against the rules or for completely unknown reasons, like Marcus, Dr. Isa, and Genevieve. Alexander, too, hadn't given me the full truth, leaving out several important pieces of information, like your new boss is a Nezarette, and I've had someone spying on you for the past 6 months. I had never been one to surround myself with crowds of acquaintances, instead preferring to keep a few true friends, close confidants who I could trust completely. At the moment, I had a grand total of 0 friends. It was time to figure out who I could add to that category. I know about Marcus, I told Alexander after I had finished dishing food onto my plate. At his quizzical head cocking, I realized he might not know that name, so I clarified, Haru. What other names will I use if I end up living as long as Alexander and Marcus? Alexander set down his fork with a soft clink. I see. And what exactly do you know about Haru? It was time for the trust test. Tell me what I should know, and I'll tell you if I do. When his mouth pinched and his eyes narrowed, I said, "I'm sorry, Alexander, but I really need you to do this. I need to know I can trust at least one person in my out-of-control life." Desperation resounded in my voice. Alexander took a deep breath and held it, studying me. Finally, he exhaled. "Haru has been my closest friend for over 1,500 years, which is why I asked him to keep an eye on you, just in case you manifested. It was a very large favor to ask of him, considering his position on the council and the unlikelihood of you manifesting. But he owed me—" "This is delicious, by the way," Alexander said, taking a bite of the chicken. "Tastes just like Suze used to make for me, back when she could stand to be in my presence long enough to cook and share a meal." "Thank you," I said, watching him. I decided he wasn't trying to change the subject, but was just being kind. I dug in, eating while he spoke. "I had been watching you for a couple years, since everyone manifests between age 18 and 25. You were nearing the end of the window, so I was fairly certain it wouldn't happen, but I called in a favor from Haru anyway. He only agreed because he could still plan the big excavation using your university as a hub." Alexander seemed to consider his next words carefully. "I've been putting off telling you about him because I didn't want you to think being Nejaret was the only reason you were on the excavation. In the process of observing you, Haru, or Marcus, as you know him, discovered that you were a talented ancient linguist. He called me in November, asking my permission to invite you to join the excavation. I wasn't against it, but I let him know I didn't think it was the best idea, considering what could be happening on the solstice, and that there would be so many Nejarets present. At that point, you hadn't shown any signs of manifesting, and like I've said before, you manifesting didn't show up in the possible futures at all. There weren't even any possible futures that showed us ever meeting or interacting." He shook his head, clearly confused by the big old blank spot in the future aught surrounding my Nejaret status. "Haru is, well, Haru," he said. "He's used to getting what he wants, and since I didn't prohibit it, he asked you to join his little team of Nejaret archaeologists. The last time I spoke with him, in mid-December, he let me know, much to my shock, that you were beginning to manifest. I was planning to return at the end of January. It should have been plenty of time. Unfortunately, your Nejaret traits developed more quickly than expected, and Suze called me in a panic when you started showing that you knew things you could only have learned from an echo. And, well," after a thoughtful moment, he said, "I think that's the gist of it." I don't know why all of a sudden he's like kind of sounding Viking-ish. I haven't been watching that. "And you two haven't spoken since?" "Haru and I? No," Alexander said resolutely. "Why not?" Alexander glared at the wall. "That, my dear, is between Haru and me." I pressed my lips together, thinking. Alexander was my grandpa, my blood. He had helped me understand what I was, and he had just told me far more than I had already known about the months leading up to my first journey into the Aught. If I couldn't trust Alexander, then I couldn't trust anyone. "Okay," I said simply. "Okay?" "Okay," I repeated. "Okay," he agreed with a nod. Minutes passed, and we ate in silence. I cleaned my plate and took seconds, while Alexander managed seconds and thirds. I wondered what would happen to a Nejaret who didn't receive adequate nutrition, but it was a question for another day. When both of our plates were clean and we were sitting in contented silence, I decided it was time to initiate phase 3 of my plan. "There's something I want to show you," I declared. "Are you done?" Alexander let out a blissful, "Yes." "Great," I exclaimed and grabbed his hand. "Hold on." Taking longer than I was used to when visiting that particular echo, the usual swirls of colors surrounded us before the world resettled in the form of a night-darkened waiting room. Surprisingly, the fertility clinic didn't seem nearly as dark as it had the last time I had visited this particular echo. Maybe my heightened Nezarette senses are finally kicking in, I considered. Would you care to explain our current setting, granddaughter? Alexander asked curtly, and I wondered if I had yet again breached some Nezaré social norm. We're in the fertility clinic Mom used. It's the night before I'm, conceived. I floundered. Just watch. There was a click, and the door separating the clinic from the stairs creaked open. A tall, slender man with pale skin and black hair entered the waiting room. And who is this? Alexander asked, suddenly very curious. My father, or my biological father. Come on, let's wait for him in here, I said, leading Alexander to the laboratory where he would be able to get a good look at the man whose DNA made up half of mine. I had a theory, but I needed to see Alexander's reaction to know if it was correct. What makes you think that the criminal is your biological father? Just watch, I repeated. The man entered the lab and turned on the lights. He headed for the pair of small freezers. Deuce! Alexander exclaimed as he stared in horror at the man. He leapt in front of me, gripping my upper arms tightly. We must leave now, Alexandra. I could feel him attempting to pull me away from the Ott, but stubbornly I held us there. What? Why? I asked. In my surprise, I had inadvertently paused the echo. The man, my father, was frozen with his arms reaching into one of the freezers. Alexander, realizing I was holding us in the echo, stopped fighting. He studied the man, examining and memorizing every detail of his appearance as well as what he was doing. I believe you are right. He is your father. But, Alexandra, you must release us so we can return to our bodies. It is imperative, he urged, wrapping me in a tight hug. I returned us immediately, and once again we sat at the dinner table with our empty plates in front of us. I let go of Alexander's hand. What? He cut me off. I've never seen him in person, but we are all forced to memorize his likeness, so we know to get as far away from him as possible if we cross his path. He is very dangerous. He breathed deeply. The man in the echo was Set. Set? I asked, astounded. As in the council member who disappeared over 3,000 years ago, Set? I had thought the man in the echo was Nezaré and had showed him to Alexander to receive confirmation, but Set? That I definitely hadn't expected. Yes, Alexander said. And he's my father? So it would seem, he said carefully. This discovery is extraordinarily important, but I'll just confuse you if I try to explain why. We should have paid more attention to... Abruptly, he lifted his fist and brought it back down on the table. Hard. Damn it all to hell. I jumped, then leaned back in my chair. Alexander? I asked, my voice small. What's going on? I was suddenly very frightened. I'd never seen Alexander act like this. I'd never seen anyone act like this. I'll stay with you tonight and accompany you to work tomorrow morning. Heru and his team are the best in this regard and will help you understand. Understand what? I asked. What it means to be of the line of Ivan and of the line of Set, he said somberly. But... No, Alexandra. You must wait until tomorrow, and whatever you do, do not enter the Ott again tonight. For the sake of your life, please, do not. Chapter 18, Prophecies and Protectors. In his complete and unexplainable paranoia, Alexander had forbidden me access to any mode of communication all night. That, in addition to his interspersed ominous remarks, had reduced me to a puddle of frayed nerves. By the time we left my building, I was ready to rush into Marcus's arms like a blubbering schoolgirl, which was exactly what I did. Oops, now I'm going to fart bucket. I really dislike it when both Alexander and Marcus are in the same scene. It is extremely difficult for my face. Little Ivanov, what is wrong? Marcus asked, wrapping his arms around me and resting his chin on top of my head. I knew the exact moment he noticed Alexander because his entire body stiffened. Yeah, it did. To my surprise, he didn't let go of me. Instead, he tightened his hold. The complete oddness of dating, if that was what we were doing, a man more than twice as old as my ridiculously ancient grandpa hadn't gone unnoticed by me. Neither had the fact that they were exceptionally close friends. In my many anxious thoughts throughout the long night, I had worried about the confrontation that was about to happen, almost as much as I had worried about whatever Alexander refused to tell me about Set, about my father, about me. Hesitantly, Marcus released me until he was holding only my hand, and then he bowed his head to Alexander. For my failure, I submit myself to you, he stated, sounding grim and formal. I release you and forgive you. Not that I should, Alexander said. Thank you, my friend. I did what I could. I want to suck your blood. I don't know why that is just like my predisposition for an accent is to go full Transylvania. Thank you, my friend. I did what I could. He will never hurt her again, Marcus said. Are they talking about me and Mike? Yes, well, we have more important things to worry about now. Alexandra and I discovered something last night. It's something you and your team will want to hear, Alexander said. Marcus studied us both before nodding. During the 15-minute walk to Denny Hall, he maintained a strong, reassuring grip on my hand, even in the face of my grandpa's narrow-eyed glares. Alexander was not happy about our familiarity. I thought it was because of the whole ancient mythological god meets granddaughter thing, but I worried it was something else, something worse. When we burst through the door to the pit, the 3 Negerettes already in the room started. Alexander entering with us could only have meant one thing. I knew about the Negerettes. Usually that would have been good news, but from my grandpa's expression, everyone was aware that we were in a bad news scenario. Meeting. Now. Marcus barked. Like he's Arnold. Meeting. Now. Marcus barked. Josh and Dominic cleared artifacts and books off a long table in the center of the room, and we all settled around it like medieval knights planning for war. Oh my god, why do I do this to myself? Dominic is in this scene as well, and he speaks. Okay. I'm French. Like, bonjour. Welcome to the club. No, now he sounds like Marcus. God. Fart buckets. Butt nuggets. Come on. Welcome to the club. Welcome to the club, Dominic whispered with a smile. It was the friendliest expression I had ever seen on his face, but he lost the smile at a glare from Marcus, who was sitting at the head of the table. I was seated to his right, with Alexander directly across from me and Josh by my side. Neffy and Dominic sat beside my grandpa. Alex has some important information. Heed his words, Marcus ordered, succinctly passing the ball to my unusually serious grandpa. Under the table, out of the view of the Negerettes, Marcus twined his fingers with mine. Last night, Alexandra took me into the art to show me the man she believed to be her biological father, Alexander began. I could feel Marcus's eyes burning into the side of my face, and I turned my head to meet them. She was, unfortunately, correct. The man she believed to be her father is indeed her father. I am convinced. Alexander paused for a deep breath, suspense piling on the table like centuries of dust. It is Set. I would have paid more attention to the three Negerettes on my right, who burst into simultaneous, horrified objections, if I hadn't been staring into Marcus's black-rimmed golden irises. His pupils dilated until only a hair-thin line of gold marred the unrelenting black, and under the table his hand clenched mine painfully. "Silence," he ordered. "Alex, are you absolutely certain?" Alexander nodded and explained what he had witnessed in the Ott less than 12 hours earlier. It was decided that I would quickly show Marcus the echo to confirm Set's identity. Again, it took me longer than usual to enter the echo, almost like the Ott had thickened and was more difficult to move through. But soon both Marcus and I were in the echo of the clinic the night before I was conceived. A string of incomprehensible syllables burst from Marcus's mouth as soon as he saw the man in the lab. I didn't need to be able to understand what he was saying to get the general idea. He was enraged, stalking around the echo of the lab and glaring at Set's frozen form. "I should have known. I should have seen," he growled, finally speaking in English. "Marcus, how could you have known? What's the big deal?" I asked, desperately trying to reel him in. Gently, he held my face between his hands and whispered, "I can see pieces of him in you now. Here." He brushed the pads of his thumbs lightly over my eyelids. "And here." He let his thumbs rest on my high cheekbones. "I am so sorry, Lex. I am so unbelievably sorry." He kissed me tenderly with so much sadness painted across his face that I would have done anything to lift his mood. "Marcus." "Return us," he said gravely. And I did. "It's true," Marcus confirmed, again sitting to my left at the table in the pit. To my complete and utter astonishment, Neffy's eyes were filled with sympathy, and she was looking at me. Oh God, if Neffy feels bad for me, then this is worse than I ever could have imagined. "How can you be sure?" Dominic asked. "Just because you've seen him. You, of all people, should know that is exactly the reason we know it's true," Marcus said, cutting Dominic off. His anger from the echo had changed from hot rage to icy fury, a far more terrifying version of the emotion, and the chill coated his words. "She took Alex into one of Set's echoes. She took me. Only one of his bloodline can ever break through his cloaks to catch a glimpse of him in the art. And how many times have you found him, Dom? 2, 3 times? And each of those after thousands of failed attempts. Lex has tried at least 3 times to see him, and succeeded each time. She is the daughter of Set." Marcus shifted his intense gaze to Alexander, and his voice broke when he added, "And the great-granddaughter of Ivan." He closed his eyes and bowed his head. This is so not good. Overwhelmed, frustrated, and really scared, I blurted, "Can somebody please explain what's going on? Why is being Set's daughter such a bad thing?" "It's not all bad, sister," Dominic said. "His bloodline is very powerful." I gaped at Dominic, absolutely dumbfounded. "I'm sorry, did you just call me sister?" He nodded. "It would seem that we share a father, though I'm not also of Ivan's line, so—" An inhuman hissing, more serpentine than feline, interrupted his statement. It was coming from Neffy. "You will let my father explain." I looked back at Marcus in time to catch a heartbreaking play of emotions cross his face before his austere mask slid into place. Something about the development bothered him deeply, beyond whatever he was about to explain. For Marcus, it was personal. Because he really cares about me? Or because of Set? Staring straight ahead, Marcus explained. "Set went rogue a few decades after Nuen's death, when Osiris, my father and the leader of the Council of 7 at the time, was murdered. The council chose me as his successor over Set, who was also Nuen's grandson, but was older. He was furious and power-hungry, probably already somewhat insane at that point, though he hid it well. The day the council made that decision, Set declared war on all who opposed him. And the nothingness first appeared. It spread throughout the Odd, either hiding or destroying the echoes of the distant future. We still don't know what the nothingness is exactly, just that it is fast approaching and that, starting on the solstice, the future possibilities are hidden from us. Marcus looked down at the table, then finally met my eyes. When Nguyen died, he sealed his power, what is known as the Ankh-At, in an impenetrable chest, which we kept in the council's vault. Set managed to steal it and hide it from us, even in the Odd. The corner of his mouth turned down in the barest of frowns. We don't know how they are connected for certain, but we do know there is a connection between the Ankh-At, Set, and the nothingness. I started to ask, how? But Marcus cut me off with a sharp shake of his head. He took a deep breath, then continued, There is a prophecy, Nguyen's prophecy, which tells of the coming of the only one who can save us. Stenenmut's second tablet, the one you haven't seen, is the only record of the prophecy. Nguyen uttered the words roughly 4,000 years ago, just before he died, but that echo and all others relating to the prophecy were destroyed, as well as all physical record. Only one of Nguyen's wives, the only Nezeret wife he ever took, Set, and I were present to hear Nguyen make his prophecy. But, Marcus shook his head, something I never understood happened, and though I remember being present during the recitation of the prophecy, neither Set nor I could recall Nguyen's words, his last words. We searched for his wife, the only other person who had heard it, but she had vanished. For over 1,000 years I searched for her, but I never did find her. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. Then, shortly after Neferure was born, a recently manifested Nezeret, Senenmut, came to me with a tablet he had inscribed. He said the words had come to him, and that he knew he had to write them down and bring it to me, but he didn't know why. I recognized the words inscribed on the tablet as soon as I laid eyes on them. It was as though a veil had been lifted from my memory. They were Nguyen's final words, the prophecy. And then Marcus started to recite. She will be the girl child of Set. She will be the girl child of Ivan. She will acquire the Ankh-At, or mankind will wither under the weight of the nothingness. She will obey Set and destroy mankind, or she will defy Set and mankind will prevail. She will decide, and either mankind or Set will be destroyed. I was shaking. Obey Set? Defy him how? Make what decision? Destroy mankind? I interrupted. There must be other descendants of those two lines. This has to be about someone else. You don't even know if it's real, I exclaimed, but Marcus just continued, shifting his hand so his fingers were again entwined with mine. The girl child of Set, the girl child of Ivan, will be born. Nephi looked at her father sharply, opening her mouth to interject, but the glare Marcus shot her would have silenced even the toughest, bravest, dumbest person. The girl child of Set, the girl child of Ivan, must be protected. The girl child's death will be the death of the world. No, this doesn't make any sense, I declared, looking into the eyes of each of the people sitting around the table. It's wrong. If I die, I die. The world won't die with me, I cried, my voice breaking. Silently, a tear slid down Nephi's perfect cheek. So, author's note, I have to say, I don't know if I was thinking about this when I wrote this scene, but I definitely, every time I read this scene, I 100% always think of that scene in, I think it's the finale of the first season, so Prophecy Girl, the finale of the first season of Buffy, when she's like yelling at Giles and she's like, telling him to that she quits, basically. She's like, read me my fortune. Ah, that's such a good scene. Regardless of all the stupid Joss stuff, it's still an amazing scene. And she's like, I don't want to die. I cry every time. Okay. Silently, a tear slid down Neffy's perfect cheek. Many have tried to open the chest containing the Ankh-At, including Set, but none have succeeded. And since Set hid the chest away, none have been able to even find it. Until now. The next verse seems to highlight your importance in accessing Nguyen's power once we enter the temple, Marcus said coolly, ignoring my outburst. I, Nguyen, make inaccessible my power, the Ankh-At. The Ankh-At must be accessed or the world will wither. No person except for the girl child shall be able to access the Ankh-At. And finally, Marcus said, he leaves a message for you, Lex. Girl child, know yourself and you shall know the gods. Girl child, trust yourself and you shall trust the gods. In the hush that fell over the room, I stood and backed away from the table. 5 sets of pitying eyes were trained on me as traitorous tears poured down my cheeks. Hollow, numb, and nauseated, I wanted to scream. No, it's wrong. My voice was weak, trembling. It's a mistake. It's not me. I have a life. I have things I want to do, to discover. I have people. This can't be about me. I'm just Lex. I'm nobody special. Finally feeling the door handle behind me, I twisted it, opened the door, and fled the room. In the empty hallway, the sounds of my panicked flight resonated off the walls like bats flapping in a cavern. I heard footsteps behind me. I had to get away. I made it through the heavy metal door to the stairwell and down one of the flights of stairs before a body crashed into me from behind, catching me up in an unyielding embrace. I wanted to struggle, to fight my captor off and run away, but he was too strong. Calm down, Lex, Marcus whispered near my ear. No matter what you believe, this is real. You must be protected. Set could come after you at any moment. You cannot go wandering around on your own. He paused, breathing heavily. The future of humanity, of our people, depends on your safety. No, I thought, but I had no choice but to comply. Marcus was too strong, and if he was right about Nguyen's prophecy about me... Okay, I breathed, under his constricting hold. With that single word, he released me. Gasping, I staggered forward and rested my forehead against the wall while I caught my breath. I could feel myself shutting down mentally, blocking out everything, thoughts, emotions, so I didn't have to face what might be real. You're going home, and I'm coming with you, Marcus stated. Alexander? I asked hollowly. Alex is going to visit Ivan. The others need to know the prophecy has been enacted. Come on, Marcus said, taking my elbow and pulling me away from the wall. In a numb fog, I let Marcus guide me outside, settle me into his car, and safely and swiftly deliver me to my apartment. Flora greeted our entrance with the utmost seriousness, meowing somberly and rubbing against our legs. I would have stayed standing in the middle of the apartment, focusing on the normalcy of my cat's body twining around my ankles, if Marcus hadn't led me to the couch and forced me to sit. He made food, though I had no idea what, and I ate it. It tasted like cardboard. Lobster would have tasted like cardboard. I don't understand, I said, watching Marcus remove the empty plate from my lap and carry it to the sink. It was the first time I had spoken since we left Denny Hall. Marcus washed the plates and set them on the drying rack, the perfect image of domesticity. I would have smiled if I had remembered how. I know, he said. He was standing in front of me, looking down with a fierce expression of a man who had once been believed to be a god. How could you understand? You are so incredibly young, so innocent, so naive. He sighed. We've been working on circumventing Nguyen's prophecy for thousands of years. But in the end, everything falls into the hands of a relative child. I still think there may be a way to nullify it altogether, but you don't need to worry about that right now. You need to rest. On the very edge of my numb mind, faint traces of annoyance danced. True as they were, his words were also demeaning. He had called me a child. Regardless, I let him pull me up by my hands and walk me into my bedroom like I was his puppet to manipulate. He guided me to the bed, helped me lay down, then tucked the covers around me. He turned to leave. "Wait," I whispered, surprised by the speed with which my hand struck out to grab his wrist. "Stay with me, please," I pleaded. The unquenchable longing coursing through my body permeated my voice. Marcus's eyes widened, and he frowned. "Lex, I don't think..." "Stay with me, Marcus. Just stay, please," I said. The unreality of the world threatened to wash me away. I needed something to tether me to what was real. I needed Marcus. Silently, he struggled for a few seconds before removing his shoes and belt and joining me between the sheets. With assured strength, he embraced me, wrapping an arm around my middle and pulling my body back against his. I was asleep within minutes. I don't know if you guys can hear my dog, but she is snoring, so this is going to be great. Great audio quality. "Lex," Marcus hissed, his arms tightening painfully around my ribs. "Wake up." I did instantly. "Marcus?" I whispered. "What?" "Shh," he breathed almost inaudibly. In a smooth, silent motion, he had me out of bed and cradled in his arms like a small child. Setting me down on the cold bathroom tile, he whispered, "Stay in here." And then he was gone. "What?" I slunk back out into the bedroom and cracked open the door, peeking into the living room. "What's going on?" Two black-clad men entered the apartment and were struck solidly in the neck by small silver knives before they had taken more than a few steps. Knives that Marcus had thrown. Who walks around with knives hidden in their clothes? And where was he hiding them? And in the furthest reaches of my mind, I thought, I just watched him kill 2 people. 2 more knives replaced the originals in Marcus's hands as 4 more men rushed into my small living space. Like a comic book hero, Marcus leapt at the lead man, flawlessly flinging his left knife into the eye socket of the next intruder. He sliced the first man's neck cleanly while the second was still falling to the floor. The third and fourth men, one tall and one short, lunged in unison, dodging Marcus's blade as they danced gracefully around him. Marcus stood as still as stone, simultaneously looking like he might never move again and like he might strike at any second. He was, I truly realized for the first time, a very dangerous man. The shorter intruder feinted a kick, but Marcus remained still. The taller intruder pretended to slowly circle behind Marcus, attempting to divide his attention. With a cobra-like strike, Marcus slashed his remaining knife across the taller intruder's throat. The instant Marcus moved, the shorter intruder lunged, only to have Marcus wrap his arm around his neck and twist it until it snapped a fraction of a second later. Marcus fought with the grace of a dancer, making the whole minute-long fight beautifully macabre. "You are hiding yourself from me in the future, Art," said a velvety male voice. It had an aristocratic British accent. When the owner of the voice stepped into the glow of the street lamps, streaming in through the blinds, I nearly gasped. It was Set, my father. "You've been keeping secrets, cousin. I didn't know... I didn't know you had the talent to cloak future echoes." See, I can do a delightful British accent when I've been drinking a lot of wine, but apparently coffee doesn't do the trick. "You're hiding yourself. I am very British. Hello, I live in London. I know the royals. I'm friends with Will. You are hiding yourself from me in the future, Art, said a velvety male voice. It had an aristocratic British accent. When the owner of the voice stepped into the glow of street lamps streaming in through the blinds, I nearly gasped. It was Set, my father. You've been keeping secrets, cousin. I didn't know you had the talent to cloak future echoes. That was no good. I didn't know you had the talent to cloak future echoes. I don't. No, now Marcus is all screwy. This is more fart nuggets, y'all. I don't, Marcus admitted. He stood in a relaxed position, looking about as harmless as a tiger. You lie, Set hissed. I couldn't see this possibility. Now, I don't know what that is. Oh my god. That's like so easy when I'm drinking. Why is it so hard right now? God save the Queen. I'm gonna go get on my horse and play polo. Have you seen Mr. Darcy? He is quite attractive. I couldn't see this possibility. Now he's like going vampire again. I couldn't. I'm from London. Where am I from? I'm British. Have you met Jane? She's quite handsome. The handsomest girl in the whole place. I do so adore her. I couldn't see this possibility. I couldn't see my daughter. What the fudge sickles? I think that's what it is. Channel Giles. Oh, that's helpful. Okay, let's see here. Buffy. That drat machine. I couldn't see this possibility. I couldn't see my daughter. You hid her. He came momentarily unhinged, exposing the maniacal, power-maddened man he truly was. The image of self-possession, Marcus replied. I do not, and I did not. I'm disappointed in you, old friend. 6 men for me, and not one carrying a gun. I would have expected more from someone so paranoid. You weren't supposed to be here. And yet here I am. Set's countenance changed abruptly, becoming mild and pleasant. Where is my daughter? In the bedroom, perhaps? Were you in there with her, helping the prophecy, my prophecy, along? I wouldn't have expected to find you wearing so... Mark Darcy? No. Fitzwilliam. Mr. Darcy. He has 20,000 a year. I wouldn't have expected to find you wearing so... Enough! Marcus barked. It's not your prophecy. Ha 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 ha! Set laughed joyously. It's as much mine as it is yours, or hers. Remember that, Haru. He stepped further into the apartment, looking around the living room with apt interest. And does she know about you? I'm sure. Like, how do British people say sure? I'm certain. Maybe they just don't say it. We'll switch it to certain for this. I'm certain you'll tell her everything you can to paint me the evil monster, if you haven't already. But try not to omit your own morbid colors. Red and black, blood and death. That's what you are, cousin. It's what you'll always be. I am what I've always been, Marcus said coldly. And if you just accept what you are, we could be out of this mess. You can end this, cousin. Just give up your god delusions. They are not delusions. Oh, now he's like Snapey. Set just got hot for a sec there. Set roared. I cringed. There was no way the neighbors wouldn't call the cops after hearing that. I glanced at one of the bodies on the floor. Let the bodies hit the floor. Let the bodies hit the floor. I glanced at one of the bodies on the floor by Marcus. A puddle of blood. Or is it a puddle of mud? Oh my god, my brain. I glanced at one of the bodies on the floor by Marcus, a puddle of blood slowly expanding around him. and swallowed a sudden rush of bile. I will not throw up. My breath started coming faster, and I choked on a sob. Calm down, damn it! But the bodies were still out there, as was Set. What will he do to me if he gets through, Marcus? Set turned and marched toward the front door.
I know you, cousin. You're still trying to find a way to sidestep the prophecy. It will happen. She will choose, and one way or another, she will obey. Now, I must depart before those pesky little law enforcers arrive, as I am certain they will. I'm sure that once they leave, you can find some pleasant diversion to occupy your minds, and to help my prophecy along. Good night, Haru.
He raised his voice and called toward the bedroom.
Good night, daughter.
After Set had been gone for at least a minute, Marcus said,
You can come out now, Lex. I know you watched and listened.
He studied me closely as I emerged from the bedroom. I wasn't sure if he was waiting for me to run screaming, to faint, or to throw up, but he seemed surprised by what he saw.
I've never seen a real dead person before,
I said numbly. I stopped as my feet reached the nearest one and gazed down at him. It was the short man with his grossly twisted neck. Marcus moved closer to me, but halted when I held up my hand. No. I need a moment. His hands, his lethal, sensual hands, rose in a momentary display of supplication before falling to his sides. Would I finally understand him? Understand what he was, like he had demanded on our date? Would I understand him and toss him away in disgust? When I finally spoke, my voice sounded hollow, as though the inside of my body had been carved into a living cavern.
Who were they? Did they have families? Wives? Children? Did you just destroy dozens of people's lives?
It was the wrong thing to say. Moving more quickly than a regular human, Marcus rushed me from behind and forced me to my knees with him. My bones banged onto the wood floor, and I knew I would bruise, at least for a few hours. What?
Turn his head. Look at the back of his neck, Lex, Marcus ordered angrily.
No, I don't want to touch him. I tried to rise, but Marcus's strength far surpassed mine, and his hold on my arms was absolute.
Do it, he growled.
I started to shake, one of my telltale precursors to ugly, heaving sobs.
Before the police arrive, preferably, Marcus urged, tightening his grip. I doubt they'd take kindly to you messing with their crime scene.
My throat clenched involuntarily as I reached toward the man's unnaturally bent neck. I had to adjust his head to a more normal position in order to see the tattoo. In thick black ink, the back of the man's neck was marked with the pointy-eared, forked-tailed Set animal. I pulled away like I had been burned. Mike. He'd had the same tattoo, in the same place. With a chilly wash of realization, I knew with absolute certainty that Set, my father, had been the man urging Mike to drug me, to rape me. But why?
These men were from Set's cult, Marcus explained, releasing me so I could stand. I didn't.
Marcus had just fought 6 men devoted to my psychopathic father and defeated them easily. I had no idea what methods Set would use to ensure my obedience, but considering my stubbornness, I doubted the process would be pleasant. I did not doubt, however, that Set could find some way to force me to obey. I had no romantic delusions about my ability to withstand physical torture. I leaned back against Marcus, finally noticing how entangled we were. My knees were between his, my socked feet between his ankles. He wrapped his arms around my middle, holding me tightly against him. Unexpectedly, a sob bubbled up from my chest, closely followed by another, and another. I don't want this life. I don't want dead bodies in my home or a psychotic father. I don't want to decide the fate of humanity. Tears streamed down my face as tremors racked my body. I can't do this. I'm not strong enough. I want things to go back to the way they were. I don't want this. I don't want this. I don't want this.
I know, Lex. I know,
Marcus said, and I realized I'd been repeating my final thought aloud. He still held me, reminding me that I wasn't alone.
We have to go. We can't stay here. The police will be here soon.
I nodded, still sniffing and shaking, and Marcus helped me up to my feet. Thora, I managed to mumble. Miraculously, Marcus understood. Within minutes, we had my cat tucked into her plastic carrier. I had thrown a few essential items into my messenger bag with my computer, and we were hustling down the stairwell. In the distance, sirens wailed. We were out the back door and disappearing down the street just as they pulled up to my building. Am I a criminal now? Will they think I killed those men? Should I go to the police station? It wasn't like I had done anything wrong, but Marcus... I couldn't tell the police that Marcus had killed 6 people to protect me from my insane, inhuman, as in of a different species, father. Should I call someone? But there was no one I could call. Not really. Is this my life now? As we sped away, I watched the red and blue police lights fade into the distance in the side mirror. All I could think was, only the guilty run. Thanks for listening to the Read by the Author podcast. To find out what happens next in the story, stay tuned for the next episode. You can also find Echo in Time, as well as the rest of the Echo Trilogy in ebook, paperback, and professionally narrated audiobook format through all major book retailers and libraries, too. Until next time, happy reading!